welcome already. I see some participants are slowly joining, which is great. Just to not feel alone in the room and kind of know who's there, I invite everyone who is not already on camera and has already changed their name to drop a little greeting in the chat and say, basically who you are and which organization you're working for, and any kind of greeting you want to convey to us. So the webinar is starting. You know that this is about the regulation and the Omnibus, and you know that you're being recorded, and that the recording will be on the YouTube channel of GreenPaths. So with that, I'm going to give you a really, really small introduction and also explain what GreenPaths is. So this is the last of a series of 12 GreenPaths webinars, actually. You can see them all on the already mentioned YouTube channel. GreenPaths is a project which is stemming on research, advocacy, and exchange. And it's exploring coherent and effective policymaking for the good of people and the environment. Or you could also say, like we call it, the just green transition. And there are different partners in the projects, really diverse partners. And we have been hosting webinars, so different partners have hosted different webinars. You will see that on the channel. And when we were asked as Friends of the Earth Europe, we didn't have any difficulty to choose the topic, because we are working a lot on deregulation, or like we call it positively, rules to protect people, planet, and democracy. We also see that is the crucial campaign topic right now, in our opinion. And we also find that this might affect a huge proportion of European policies for a just and green transition. But yeah, we will hear about the nitty-gritty later from our experts. So I'm just going to do some housekeeping. I can also say who I am. Laura Hieber from Friends of the Earth Europe, and I will hand over soon to my colleague Alban, who will introduce our amazing speakers. Is the chat working, actually? I can't see any messages in the chat. I just invited you all to drop a greeting there. Maybe, Marina, if you could check the chat. It's also not super urgent, but yeah, as I said, nice to know who else is on the call. As I said, we're recording this. You will stay on mute for now. Your cameras will be switched off. And then ways of interaction, we want you to interact. So we have, in theory, the chat. Let's see if it's functional at some point. But if not, we have, in any case, a Menti, which I assume you know. It's a tool to, in this case, collect questions. So I invite you to post your questions to the panelists there, and then we will address them at a later stage once we have heard from them. We might not. There's also a Q&A, but which we have used to chat, which is great. So normally I see your message on the Q&A, but normally we would use the chat, which is now working, and the which is not working yet. Anyway, so we have agreed to use the chat and the Menti, not the Q&A tool. Although I will check once in a while what's written in there as well. Yes, I think that's it for now. I'm trying to respond to the various chat messages, but I will shut up now and hand over to my colleague, Alba. Thanks, Alba.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alban Courdidier. I'm a corporate accountability campaigner with Friends of the Earth Europe. I was also for a while the coordinator of a public European campaign for due diligence. And today I would like to introduce you to our panelists who will be with us to talk about deregulation and more specifically about a certain case. So first of all, welcome Nick Omunuk, a young Ugandan activist fighting against EACOP, the longest heated pipeline in the world from energy company Total. I'll let you, Nick, go into more detail about the case later. Anna Leitner from FO Austria Global 2000, a resource justice campaigner who's been working on this case for quite a few years now. and Antoine Julien from the European Coalition for Corporate Justice. Antoine, you joined ECCJ last year after a period of time working in Parliament, and you will be helping us go through the details or the ways of working of European institutions. So, what are we going to be talking about today more specifically? We will be exploring, if that works. There we go. We will be exploring the case of a specific European law called the CSDDD, and I'm going to take you back through a little bit of the history. What is this law and how it came about? And I'll let Antoine go into more detail about how it worked. So essentially, over multiple years and actually decades, mass casualties events and mass environmental destruction events demonstrated the need for European democracies to equip themselves with laws that allow them to address the responsibility of their multinational corporations in mass casualties and mass environmental destruction events. Some of you may have heard about some of these examples. These are just a few of them. So in the case of Rana Plaza or Kick Factory fire, we're talking about mass casualties events happening in Bangladesh. The Brumadinho Dam collapse is the collapse of a tailing pond dam in Brazil, and the death of a river in the Niger Delta. Oil pollution is actually an old and still ongoing case about the impact of oil drilling in Nigeria and the amount of pollution that's been spilling into the Niger River. These cases and others demonstrated the need for a legal equipment for European and other countries. And so as a result, in 2017, France was the first country in the world to equip itself with what's called the duty of vigilance law, that essentially creates a requirement for companies, a responsibility to explore their value chain, so supply chain upstream and value chain downstream, value chain being both of them, and find instances of risks of human rights violations and environmental destruction. And so essentially creates a duty to find that in their value chain and address it through a series of measures. That law was the first one, but it was not the last one. Germany equipped itself with a somewhat similar law. Norway equipped itself with a somewhat similar law. Currently, other countries outside of Europe are discussing getting one as well. We're talking about South Korea, Brazil, at some point the US. Obviously, that's not necessarily the case anymore. And that ended with the creation at the European level of the CSDDD. So the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive was introduced by the European Commission in 2024. Introduction of a law in Europe does not mean adoption. That law was adopted in 2024, sorry, introduced in 2022, adopted in 2024. I'll let Antoine speak a little bit about the process later. And that law creates quite a few very important things. First of all, it creates access to justice pathways for victims and their representatives. In practice, that means that, say, a community of a Brazilian community close to victims of a mass casualty event under CSDDD would have the ability to bring a court case against European companies profiting from the activities that generating the human rights violation in their countries. So we're talking about a law that allows victims outside of Europe or inside of Europe to bring cases in front of European courts, even in the case where a European company would be benefiting from the activities of its subsidiaries, of its business suppliers, of some of its business clients. And so it doesn't have to be specifically about the company's direct activities. It can be about the indirect activities that are hidden in the supply chains. It creates a few other mechanisms. I'm not necessarily going to go into detail, but one thing that's very relevant is that There's also a climate element to this file. It's separate from what's called the due diligence requirements, so the duty to explore supply chains. And essentially, the climate obligations make it mandatory for companies to design and adopt climate transition plans that are putting their own activities in line with the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degrees target. And as adopted in 2024, it also creates a duty for these companies to put that plan into effect. And so this is, to my knowledge, the first and currently only law that creates requirements for companies to align themselves with the Paris Agreement's targets, or to align their activities and business models with the Paris Agreement's targets. So it makes it quite a landmark law for those reasons, both because it's the first large European law creating a duty of due diligence for companies inside and outside of Europe, and because of the climate requirements. Now, unfortunately, as we mentioned earlier in this call, we are entering a full deregulation cycle. So between 2019 and 2024, the European Union adopted quite a comprehensive package of sustainability, climate, environmental law, and social laws in some regards, called the European Green Deal. As of 2024, the new elections and the introduction of the new commission in the autumn of 2024, we are seeing a deregulatory cycle. That cycle takes the form of what's called as omnibus. So omnibuses are laws that are proposed by the European Commission to amend several laws at the same time, several existing laws at the same time. And so the one omnibus that we're talking about in this case is nicknamed Omnibus 1, which makes considerable changes to CSDDD, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is essentially a climate reporting law, and the EU taxonomy, which is a set of fiscal rules and investment data disclosure rules. That is the first one. And so that's why we are proposing today to take a look at the ways by which this omnibus came about, the ways by which civil society is fighting against it. But you should know that we are using this as a symbol of a much bigger deregulation push. And so we currently know about 9 total omnibus that are either rumored, have already been announced, or in negotiations. So these are at various stages. Not all of them have been confirmed. And they're not necessarily going to be the topic of today, but I wanted you to know that these all exist, and they've all been announced between essentially December 2024 and today. And that is just year 1 of our new commission's mandate. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to hand it to Antoine from now on so that you can introduce us to the ways of working of the European Union around CSDDD and the deeper history of that file. Thank you.
Thank you, Alban. I'm just gonna share my screen real quick. Yeah. Can you see it properly?
Yes, thank you, Anton.
Yes. Okay, let's go. So thank you very much, Alban, for the introduction. I am Antoine Julien, so I'm a policy officer of the European Coalition for Corporate Justice. I was working, as Alban said, in the Parliament during the negotiation on the CSDDD, so the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive that I will be talking about a little bit further during this presentation. And it was indeed a very rocky process. So I'm just maybe first gonna share you some useful acronyms, because I know that not everybody is super familiar with the European institutions and the lawmaking. So when I will be speaking about COM in my presentation, will be the European Commission, Council, Council of the European Union. EP will be European Parliament, with the four, in my opinion, major group that have power right now. So the European People's Party, that is more center-right. Renew will be the centrist party, SND, Socialists and Democrats, so center-left. And ECR, the far-right, one of the main far-right groups in the parliament right now. When I speak about the von der Leyen majority, it means EPP, Renew, SND, and the Greens, which all voted to re-elect Ursula von der Leyen as president of the Commission last year in July 2024. Alban mentioned it, CS-DDD is going to be for Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, the EUDR. That is, I would say, the first example that we have of this deregulation current that happened at the end of last year, so around September, October, November 2024, is the regulation on deforestation-free products. I'm gonna try to change my slide. Voila. So in April 2024, I'm gonna keep it to the last dates because it was indeed a very rocky process. But in April 2024, we had the European Parliament vote on CS-DDD. I was working there in 2023 from in February, starting in February 2023. And during the first round of negotiations, it was really, really rocky, meaning hard to find agreements. We could see that the file was becoming more and more political and more on the ideological side rather than the technical side. It was finally adopted. So first during a vote in the plenary session of the parliament and then by the council in May 2024. We had a new parliament elected a month after that, and Ursula von der Leyen re-election in July 2024. So a lot happened in 3 months, 4 months actually. And then in September, the first initiative that I would call deregulatory came from the Commission with the EUDR postponements. And we could really see a start of a shift in the Commission's lawmaking process. The Omnibus 1 was announced on in November 2024. The project of the Omnibus 1. The actual content of this Omnibus was only presented in February 2025. After a new commission was also elected by the Parliament in December 2024. So I'm going to speak about the fast track process and the active prevention of the civil society participation. So first, what do we mean when we say omnibus? It's a very vague term in my opinion, but the definition from the Commission is basically a simplification package that is gathering sustainability legislations in one text to streamline requirements and boost EU competitiveness. So this has really become the main arguments of the Commission. But this process has been flawed by several very important things when it comes to EU lawmaking, which are transparency, public consultation, and impact assessment. So first, there was a real lack of transparency from the Commission side, as civil society and stakeholders were not necessarily warned about some consultation. Some consultation happened behind closed doors. These public consultations are usually carried by the Commission, have changed this year and have now become reality checks. Reality checks are basically events where the Commission is going to invite practitioners and ask them what the impact would concretely be on their work if they had to modify a law or to come up with an omnibus. And what we saw during these reality checks and these consultations was that there was an overrepresentation of critical businesses when it came to CS-DDD, with little to no civil society organizations invited or given the floor. So already a lack of balance when it comes to consultation and transparency. There is also an obligation for the Commission to carry an inter-service consultation that has to, well, last longer than a weekend and not during a weekend. And it's basically so that each service of the Commission can actually reflect on that text and formulate opinions on it. Added to that, we have a partner organization that is called Reclaim Finance in France that analyzed the proposal of the Omnibus that was released at the end of February and found that 70% of the major industry groups demands were actually included in this final proposal. So when I'm speaking about these major industry groups, I'm talking about the American Chamber of Commerce, I'm talking about Business Europe, I'm talking about the MEDEF. And on the structure maybe of this omnibus, so we have the omnibus one that is divided in two sub proposals. So the first one is called Stop the Clock proposal. So it basically postpones the entry into force and transposition into national legal order for member states. And the second part is more on the content, and I won't develop that today because it would take me more than 15 minutes. But this first part, the Stop the Clock proposal, was voted in Parliament after an agreement of the von der Leyen majority. Basically, this was to secure compromise minority, let's say, and to prevent the far right from entering these negotiations and have a heavy weight as they constitute a very numerous force in the parliament lately. So I'm going to maybe speak a little bit more about EPP, so the European People's Party in the parliament, and why they're a playmaker. They have a major role. Basically, they can shift the parliament from a moderate majority to a far right majority. Some EPP members, including the co-negotiators on this file, are actually willing to work with the far right if they don't find a satisfying agreement with the within the von der Leyen majority. This has been said publicly. As always, what is said publicly in politics and what is said in private can sometimes differ. But when you see that some far-right groups also positioned themselves earlier this year and called for the destruction of the Green Deal, their collaboration doesn't seem that far. We have been monitoring it, and for now, it's still unknown if this will work or not, but it is still a threat in the parliament. On the side of that, these political groups are constituted of national delegations. For example, we had the Irish and Polish MEPs from this EPP group that voiced their opposition to working with some of these groups, notably ECR. This is due not necessarily to misalignment of ideologies, but to historical or political reasons in their member states. For example, in Poland, the EPP does not want to work with ECR as ECR contains PIS, a far-right party that was against the current prime minister. We also have the Council of the European Union, and its position is decisive because it gives the final green light to any text. And we recently had some public positioning from two head of states. So Germany, after the Chancellor Merz got elected, there was a coalition agreement not to touch upon these texts, or at least not abolish them like it was the will before. This has not been respected or mistranslated last week, and since then we've seen his government basically backing down from this earlier statement. And we also, I think you know it, had a very similar event in France with President Macron. But both these statements do not represent the political line at EU level. And I think this is something that is really important to mention in this context. So I'm going to center maybe a little bit more on the CSDDD and why this was a legislation that mattered and that still matters. and how it was supported and is still supported by a broad range of actors and by the society. So during the negotiations and during, yeah, I think Coreper, or maybe before, that's a specific formation of the council, almost 3/4 of European citizens that were surveyed were actually supporting an EU law that would require companies to cut their greenhouse gases emissions, while 2/3 actually believe that banks must also be held accountable for the action and of the businesses. Sorry, I'm trying to get rid of this. Of the businesses that they invest in or lend money to. And a similar poll by our Swiss colleagues was conducted in Germany and Italy during these negotiations, where we could see that the current Renew MEPs, so FDP in Germany, and ECR, so Fratelli d'Italia, so the Giorgia Meloni party, were actually supporting the CSDD and its goals by 70%. Since this omnibus arrived and reshuffled the cards a little bit, we had voices actually raising against the changes proposed in the omnibus on the CSDD, notably by investors, by the ECB, so a major financial actor, academics, economists as well, and some progressive companies. We also I personally read a recent survey from We Are Europe, an independent organization, where, if I remember well, we had an overwhelming support from more than 1,000 companies that answered that survey to sustainability goals prior to the omnibus. So that shows that there is support from the civil society, but also from businesses. While the argument of competitiveness and protecting businesses is often used by the Commission, we can see that there is a misalignment here as well. So looking forward, because this proposal has been voted at least partially, there's still the content proposal, but this is to come still. I will talk about the timeline a little bit more afterwards. Recently, ECJ and several other partner organizations filed a complaint to the Ombudswoman for maladministration following the slide of consultation and impact assessment from the Commission. So the ombudsman/woman, it's a woman now, so I'm saying woman, but usually it's ombudsman. It's an interinstitutional body of the EU that holds the institutions, bodies and agency accountable and promotes good administration. It is the third complaint that the Ombudswoman has received in recent months since Ursula von der Leyen re-election and the election of her new commission. Basically concerning the Commission's compliance with its own legal requirements, its better regulation guidelines. So that's something I can explain further later if you want. And its rules on preparing legislative files. And what is the Ombudswoman asking for any documentation relating to the decision not to perform a stakeholder consultation? So the lack of public consultation, a new impact assessment that was not carried properly in the first place for this omnibus, and also documents related to the decision of not conducting a climate consistency assessment. That's a bit of the technical point, but it's a legal obligation contained in the European climate law that the Commission basically has to carry that assessment. And also the reason why this fast-track inter-service consultation that I spoke earlier was carried over a weekend without much transparency. All of these documents should be sent by June 6th, so next week, to the Ombudswoman by the Commission for expansion. The documents should be sent by the 6th of June, and then before June 18th, there will be arrangements made for inspection and meetings between the Ombudswoman and the Commission. So usually it takes much longer than that, and we're really glad that this happened so fast. We'll be monitoring it, of course, but this is a really good step in the right direction. What are the consequences to this complaint and potentially if the ombudswoman founds maladministration? First, I will start to say that there is no legal consequences in the sense of there is nothing that will constrain the commission to really do anything. After saying that, the commission still, given the political pressure and the reputational harm that this could provoke, generally still do three things. So they, I mean, the ombudswoman can issue a recommendation suggesting corrective action. She can also publish a critical report highlighting the maladministration and encourage the commission to resolve this issue. Generally, when it comes to that, the commission wants to avoid reputational harm, apologies, and the political pressure that comes with it, and they generally tend to actually modify their initiative. I am not pessimistic, but not very sure that this will happen in this case, or at least we'll see minor changes. But we are really working in a different context now. The commission is really different from last Monday. This ombudsman complaint and the results of that inquiry can also be used in courts to strengthen a legal action, although it doesn't have a legal strength as a proof, let's say. I will briefly touch upon the European Parliament timeline. So the official negotiations right now have not started in the European Parliament, with certain groups still discussing internal priorities. I have a few slides on timeline I will show right after, but just to give you a bit of context. We have the committee votes at the end of July. So Parliament is split in several committees that have either competence or can give opinions on a file. And these opinions are going to influence the final report that is drafted in the jury committee. So it's the legal affairs committee that exists in the European Parliament. We expect the draft report to be drafted by early June, so next week, and presented in this legal affairs committee at the end of June. And then we will see a vote based on that report in October in the same committee, to have the final plenary votes in plenary session in October. We have a provisional timeline for now from our discussions inside the parliament. I think the timeline is very ambitious. There is a lot of political pressure, and we could see dragging on for a bit more than just October. So we'll see. Timeline here. So do not bother with the first parts. What really matters is here. So from the 23rd of June until October, amendments, consideration of amendments, so groups can table amendments and have them integrated or not in the report, and then you have the final votes. These additional committees are interesting, but I won't dive deep into that today because it will be too technical and too long. This is a list of rapporteurs and shadow rapporteurs. So basically you have one main rapporteur in the file that is going to draft the reports, and then you have the shadows, so basically representing each group inside the parliament. So this is a bit a poor play image. Jorgen Warborn being the rapporteur in jury, so the one having the most power. And he's from Sweden. So you have very different nationalities: Sweden, France, Poland, Germany, the Netherlands, but our focus is remaining on the jury committee, so the legal affairs committee. Looking forward, what can we do now? As Alban said, this was only first omnibus, and we have been, working in these deregulation context for a few months now. There is a next fleet of omnibuses coming, including more sustainability legislation, and it really is now symptomatic of deregulation and how simplification and competitiveness are used as terms to justify, well, deregulation, plainly and simply. So as I said, in this omnibus, no public consultation, no impact assessment, and a very questionable process overall that sets the tone for the years to come. The next omnibus, I mean, there was an omnibus unveiled, I think, last week on mid-cap definition and which requirement they should be exempted from, touching upon some sustainability legislation as well. And the consultations on this omnibus were only business groups. I mean, the population that was consulted for this specific omnibus was only business group, which shows that it is now a pattern. And that brings me to my last point. What can we do? It seems a bit hopeless, but there are several things we can do. We, and I'm speaking to you directly, actually, can engage with networks to apply public pressure. So when I'm thinking network, I'm thinking national coalitions, European or national media, policymakers as well. Always keep in mind that what is said in public is not the same as what is said in private, and that can give us a little bit of a margin of maneuver sometimes. And yeah, civil society and European citizen as a whole should not let this unanswered and file complaints for each omnibus that follows the same pattern. I think that is it. This is my email address in case you need to ask me some question or want to stay in touch. Thank you very much. I hope I wasn't too long.
Thanks so much, Antoine. I'm just coming in quickly. And yeah, of course, it's always like the technical issues. I think it's very appreciated that you let us through it and also explain some acronyms. I'm just coming in on the technical, very important point of asking questions. So we want you to ask questions, please. And I'm really sorry about the chat that doesn't work as we want it to work. I'm actually not sure people can actually read what I posted in the chat for everyone. So if you have trouble accessing Menti, please go to the Q&A, and the last question I answered also gives another, like the answer I gave to the last question that is answered in the Q&A gives you a way of accessing Menti, and then you have to click ask question, and then you can post your question. Some of you have already started, but I want to make sure that it's accessible for all. And if you have any problems, you please use the Q&A tool on Zoom for anything that is not questions to the speakers. I hope that was clear. And with that, I'm giving back to Alban to introduce us to the next wonderful speaker.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Antoine. I think this is a very good demonstration of a couple of things. First of all, the trajectory of travel, right? We see that a lot of conservative politicians are engaging in corporate capture at a very institutional level and are taking us on a deregulation path. You demonstrated that for Omnibus 1. We can expect this to be the case for the future incoming omnibuses. And I think the second thing that is a highlight of that conversation is the complexity of the European process and the ways by which all legislators, all parties in these negotiations use this complexity to hide what is actually happening from, well, the public to a degree, because the public does not necessarily take an interest in European affairs. And when we see how complex it is, we can understand why. But also from civil society organization, you demonstrated that civil society in general was not represented in the quote unquote reality check, what I call corporate captured consultation processes by the Commission. And that is very much something that all civil society organizations in Brussels can echo. I would like to introduce you now to Nicholas Omanuk, youth Ugandan activist fighting the East African crude oil pipeline. Nick, I'll let you go into the details of what ECOP is, but I want to specify something. You are currently living in Europe. That wasn't always the case. You've been engaging in the public campaign, the Justice is Everybody's Business campaign, the campaign that was created to lead to the adoption of CSDDD. So you've worked alongside us. And so you have this sort of dual perspective of coming from a country where a significant proportion of the population is affected by projects, polluting projects from European companies. And at the same time, you are yourself an activist, you are an actor in this fight. And so I'll give you the floor to talk about your work and the perspective of your communities.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you. I will not talk much about my name and where I come from. So I will just share about, of course, the Stop ECOP campaign. And for those, of course, who don't know ECOP is the East African crude oil pipeline, and it's going to be like a heated pipeline from the western part of Uganda up to Tanzania. The reason why this pipeline was constructed to easily not like crude oil, and this crude oil to be heated at very high temperatures because the oil there is waxy. But just as you know, is that whenever these projects are there, or whenever these projects come, just like you saw cases in the Niger Delta and cases in other African countries, it was kind of the same story that one of the strategies that were used, of course, to bring about this project was, of course, PR, like showing PR about like telling people that they are going to get jobs or they are going to get good housing and a lot of things. So there's a lot of misinformation that is fast spread out, and then what comes next is that the people who own the land are actually not given time to decide whether they should leave or not. So they are not even allowed to, for example, most of the documents are in English, so some communities even cannot speak English or cannot even translate these documents. So it has to really take a lot of time for them to understand and for them to really decide. So there's also not very much proper consent from affected communities, and this is something that actually also happened. And then most communities got, of course, displaced. And what happened is after the displacement is that a lot of communities realized that it was not fair, and realized that they had been like something had been stolen from them or something like this, and they started, of course, speaking about what happened, and also the unfair compensation, and trying to raise this awareness and to seek justice. But of course, they could not get justice because the power was in the hands of the few, a minority who have so much money, and at the same time, the power is on them, and they are the ones who have their selfish interests. So this was something that actually happened. So when the first lot of activists went to France to talk about the Stop ECOP campaign, nobody actually really knew about even the campaign in France. So many people were not so much aware of this. And when the activists, most of the activists came in to actually share the story, it was actually very surprising for a lot of people to actually, not just for the activists, but also for the people themselves, that of course they're consuming a lot of products, but they don't ask where these products are coming from, how are they being processed, what are the supply chains, is there really fair consent, and is there fair trade? And so when this campaign started, a lot of people like really did not take it serious. But then when several banks and financial institutions started also stepping out because of the pressure, because of public pressure, and I personally was in front of one of the stakeholder companies that were involved in the project called Isoplas, and Isoplas is like an Austrian pipeline company. So we went in front of this company, and we protested together with Fridays for Future Austria, and we confronted them, and we actually seek that they withdraw. And also after like a year later, they also withdrew from the pipeline. So it's so like it's also about the progress that also came in from the stories that we shared, and from the cases of human rights violations, where of course also several activists have been detained. And of recent days, there's 11 activists who are waiting for a hearing actually on the 5th of June. And just apart from these activists, there are also cases where also activists were kidnapped. And one of the most recent cases was around last year, where an activist who was working for one of the NGOs called EGI was kidnapped, and just a week later he was found thrown somewhere. And these are of course tactics that come when you speak truth to power. Yeah, and just like these are things that also kept coming. So I think for me, like, just of course to share this perspective that that most of the times, like, also our, like, most of the times the projects are not implemented the same way. They are also implemented in like, for example, let me say that there is a project that has to be implemented in Europe, and for example, a project that has to be implemented in Uganda. So when you compare all these cases, the strategies used are not some of the times are not actually the same. I will give an example of the Lutzeraf campaign, and how also, like, it really took a lot of time, and it really, the people who are living there were actually given time, even if like at the end they were displaced, but they really gave them a lot of time to actually get a decision and think about what they actually want. But when it all usually comes to projects in countries that are really vulnerable, there are a lot of things that are exploited, including the people being indigenous communities and not being aware of even these documents and not understanding some of these things. So these are some of the things that are exploited, in that most of the communities realized later that they made mistakes. And another thing that is also utilized or used is the political sphere. So when they also realize that these corporations can convince just a few people in power, they know that they will have controlled the rest of the people, and they know that also if some people refuse, they will use military force, and if military force is not used, they will use other tactics. So there's always different tactics used that of course also need to be accounted for whenever, like, these kind of projects are going to be like put in several communities. Yeah, and just to come, of course, to the campaign on the CSDD also, I was with Maxwell Atuhura, who has also been part of the case against Total Energies under the duty of vigilance law. And when we were actually kind of like campaigning for the CSDD to actually be approved, I would just say that it was, for me, it was really so emotional, and at the same time so painful, and a lot of work that we really had to speak from the ground and speak about our stories, and really talk about how relevant such laws are important, including providing the cases that I've talked about, like the kidnappings, also talking about the cases of detentions, of unlawful detentions of human rights activists, of also not allowing people, for example, who have refused compensation to actually stay on their land. So these are the things that we actually shared. And later on, when the law was actually approved, we actually got some hope. And now there is now another threat where, of course, there's a deregulation and different arguments that the competition perspective of it. But for me, I don't think it's about competition. It's about trust, and a lot of African countries are actually waking up because it is not just about businesses just going and then they extract. But a lot of communities are now rising. We are seeing countries like Burkina Faso trying to cut ties also from former colonies and trying to make sure that they are the ones running their own industries and trying to make sure that they are the ones like in control of what they need to do and what they have to do. So I think in the future, in the coming years, it's really going to be about trust. Who can you trust? And if this trust is not built, if you deregulate, then this trust is not built, because you're going to deregulate and you exploit. You're just repeating history again, and this history just did not work, and it just won't keep on working anymore, because a lot of communities, a lot of people, a lot of majority people, a lot of young people in Africa, which has one of the biggest, I would say, youngest population in the world. All these young people are waking up, and including me, I am an African. So we are aware and we are watching, and we are ready to always say no. And whether like some things are happening, and whether most tactics are used, like when you see in the DRC still in the transition. So it's just not about also the current phase of oil extraction, but also the phase of renewable energy, where of course communities are also suffering and facing impacts because of the extraction of the raw materials for renewable energy. And I think we are watching, and we will not agree to everything. And yeah, that's what I can say.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for first of all sharing the experience of your work on the front line, and sharing the experience of some of your colleagues on the front line. Also for demonstrating the burden imposed on either victims, their allies, the population of countries outside of Europe, whether they are on the front line or not, and the injustice imposed on those who speak up against the malpractice and the abuse from European corporations. I think your point also on the role of Europe, or the place of Europe compared to other communities is well understood. The means by which African civil society, Latin American civil society, Asian civil society, and of course also European civil society is scrutinizing the behavior of European companies and the ways by which the European institutions are deciding to regulate them or not, to let them do whatever they want or not, to let them commit crimes or not. That is of course a precious testimony for you to share. Anna, I'm going to be pivoting towards you. You're working in Austria. You are part of Global 2000. Your organization is part of a national coalition fighting for CSDDD and European Due Diligence Directive. But at the same time, Global over the years has engaged in quite a lot of conversations with the public about how to talk about this law, what does it do, how to break down the complexity of European lawmaking for the benefit of a national audience, and how the effect of CSDDD tie into the life of European consumers. So I'll give you the floor to talk about your work and the great campaign that you've put in place in Austria. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to this webinar. Thank you, Nico, for your testimony, and Antoine for the overview on the European policymaking. I want to just quickly put into plain language what I see happening here. We see that democracy is under attack massively, right? It's under attack by big business interest, by oligarchs, and the people that they pay. We see that this attack is under the radar. It's happening under the radar in Europe, in contrast to the US, where we as Europeans are looking to. We see the Doge, we see like the deregulation happening, the Musk happening, but we have deregulation here and it's completely under the radar. We know that the effects of this attack will be tremendous and they will be felt after the deregulation drive, right? So this is it's a cause effect that will have a delay, and I think the deregulation now going under the radar, the effect only being felt later, even sometimes of policies that haven't even been working yet, like the CSDDD, is a huge problem. Those effects, when we see them, won't be easily reversed, because we'll already be reaching 2030 by then, right? People will already have been affected by malpractice. And I also want to say the effects of this deregulation will be felt in Europe, will be felt by European citizens, our working contracts, our environmental protection, our air quality, but it will also be felt, and that's what Nicholas brought home, it will also be felt beyond Europe. And the fourth point for me is we have to take action now, right? As civil societies, as trade unions, this is such a crucial moment. And we need to take back the citizen power that is being really stripped from us now in this attack on democracy that is really going under the radar. I think it's really striking to see the neoliberal growth agenda just now back on the agenda, the neoliberal growth strategy that is going to create this downward spiral instead of what was happening in the last Commission mandate, that we were setting laws at a European level, trying to have an upward spiral, right? At the Austrian level, we are in a situation where, I mean, as Alban, as you've said in your introduction, we have a strong collaboration here in environmental NGOs, trade unions, development organizations working together to inform the public, raise awareness on the necessity for corporate accountability laws, and to support policymakers in their work. But I also have to say that at the national level, and I think that that can be echoed by a lot of groups, we're really struggling now as well. There's a few factors to that. I mean, in Austria, like in other countries, since the time that the CSDDD has been passed at the EU level, we've had re-elections as well, not only at EU level, also at national level. So new coalitions are in place at national level, with new people, with new majorities in parliament, also at national level, that don't necessarily have the same view or have the same support for the CSDDD and other laws. For example, also in the Austrian coalition agreement, there's quite a focus on deregulation. It's not explicitly linked to the CSDDD in a Austrian coalition agreement. So like the working agreement of the parties that have formed a coalition for the next 5 years, or presumably 5 years, that should be the period. They mention deregulation. They don't necessarily tie it specifically to the CSDDD, but what the Conservative Party and the Minister for Economy is doing is taking that reference to deregulation as the reason, as the grounds for strongly opposing CSDDD, and even going as far as calling for the same that Merz and Macron have called for in the past week, namely abolishing the law altogether. So also at the national level, the tide has turned, you could say. And what we see is that also in media reporting about corporate accountability, about CSDDD, there's been quite a change, and we see that this narrative of growth that is necessary, and for the growth, the competitiveness is necessary, and for this competitiveness, just as a natural cause effect, we have to get rid of deregulation, then we'll be more competitive. This is very widespread now, and this has really like undermined reporting, and has undermined the way in which in which also voices of concern are listened to. So also at the national level, I think that's something, it happened more quickly than we all thought, that this European narrative of competitiveness, this new commission strategy, really like has an effect on the national level very quickly, just within a few months. Yeah, and for example, we're seeing now in media a lot of this, like top managers are saying this isn't even enough deregulation. So scrapping the CSDDD isn't even enough for some. And those are the voices that get listened to and that get airtime. I think there's still a very much need to raise awareness in how far this deregulation push goes, and that it will not stop at the CSDDD and at CSRD. It will not stop at deregulating businesses. I think that's something. I mean, you've showed in the beginning all the different omnibuses that will come, and that's something that's under the radar now in Austria, at least still. It's more like, okay, we deregulate business, then we'll be competitive, and you know, maybe that's it, but that there will be more of this, and that will have more effects is not yet widely known. But at the same time, we know from polling after polling that public is actually in favor of laws for corporations, right? Public is in favor of climate action. Public majority is in favor and supports things like fair trade, for example. As Global 2000, we're part of Fair Trade Austria, and the results has just come in from the past year, and Austria is one of the top countries for fair trade products. So there is an awareness among consumers for supply chains, I would say, and for fairness in supply chains, for the need for businesses to also shop responsibly. We don't see this translated in the media environment. Maybe, Alban, a word on, because you introduced me saying that we had such a great campaign, and sometimes it's like, well, it feels like long ago, and it already feels very distant what we did, what we all were working on in the past years, now with this attack. But yes, indeed, we managed to mobilize in Austria a good share of the signatures for the Europe-wide petition. So we had more than 15,000 people signing for a petition in Austria for a strong CSDDD, also with climate due diligence. We managed to set up a business letter with more than 70 companies supporting a strong CSDDD, also with climate due diligence, with big and small companies among the signatures. Austria is really a country with many small companies, and we talked to a lot of them, and a lot supported our initiative because they need a level playing field. They are already shopping as a company sustainably, and they need the big ones to do that as well, to have a fair playing field. So that was really a success, and I think it also brought home the point. Now we haven't managed to renew that yet, also just because of everything happening so fast with the Omnibus. Well, no one had that planned, right? And I want to share something that we did, two things that we use in raising awareness among the public, sort of for supply chains and the necessity. One is something I ask at every event to the audience, and that we've really focused also our communications on, is a question: who here, maybe also a question to the audience now in the webinar, who has tried in the past in their shopping to buy more sustainably, to maybe look if there's organic labels on the food, on the produce you buy, to see if they are fair trade, to see if they're come from the region. And usually, now I can't see your hands in the audience today, but usually all the hands go up, right? And then I ask, who in the audience thinks that majority of companies are trying to shop sustainably in their procurement? So if they shop organic, if they shop fair trade, if they pay attention to where the products that they buy as a company are coming from. And usually there's not a single hand up in the air, right? I think that's like when you a common knowledge that companies look at the price first. And then I ask, and who thinks that companies should be obligated to, just like you here in the room, pay attention to sustainability in their shopping, in their procurement, in their supply chains? And again, I think then that's a logical conclusion, right? We can't put the burden on consumers, and that just brings home the point. We also, and that's the second thing I want to share in terms of campaigning and work we do at the national level, together with Südwind Development Organization, Justice Organization, we run a test each year on seasonal chocolate products. So products for Christmas and then for Easter, little chocolate Santas and little chocolate bunnies, to see which of the brands are actually using organic and fair trade in their supply chains. And we find that there are vast differences between the sustainability of the different chocolate products. And it always, for me, as at first, when I first did the test, it also seemed like a very minor exercise, so to say, because, well, it's just a chocolate Easter bunny, right? But I've seen that showing this comparison, and even with a price tag, we can really argue, we can really bring home the point that a lot of the bunnies that are very known by big brands that are not cheap, mostly because you pay for the brand, I guess, are among the higher price range, don't show their sustainability credentials, or they have none, right? We have to assume they have none. And that just really, again, shows that it's possible to go more sustainable as a company. And as long it's not obligatory, not everyone does it, right? And we as consumers, why do we have the possibility to buy something in the supermarket that is not good, that maybe has child labor in supply chain, that threatens the basis of the living planet we depend on? And that, yeah, it's the companies that really have the bigger shopping every week, right? In comparison to me as a consumer. So that's something we do regularly in Austria together with our partner organization Südwind. And yeah, we'll continue to do that. And I think we'll continue to have to find more ways to communicate now that what was achieved is now under attack. As I said, I mean, I think this is really going under the radar. And I really want to ask everyone here also in the webinar today, and to really spread the message and to take action. I think, Alban, that's something you also still do. Oh yeah, I'll share the link to the Austrian business statement. I got that question. Yeah, I'll stop here. I think we still want to have time for questions.
Thanks a lot, Anna. Yes, there are a few questions that I think are almost housekeeping matters, so I'm gonna take them very quickly. There was a request for you to share the Austrian business statement. You will do that in the chat, I believe. There was a question about whether we will be sharing the presentation after the webinar. The presentation in and of itself, and I don't know which presentation you're referring to, whether it was mine or Antoine's. I have to assume it was Antoine's. What we will be sharing is a recording of the webinar. It will be available on the GreenPaths YouTube channel, and correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, but I believe you will all receive a follow-up email with a link in the coming days. And then we have a few more in-depth questions. First of all, I want to say, Nick, I believe you have to, you might not be able to stay until the end in 15 minutes. So if anyone has questions for Nick, please ask them right now so that I can send it to him. But first, maybe a short one for you, Antoine. Do we have a timeline for all of the omnibus, and what do we know in general about all of the detailed deregulation packages that are coming in?
That's a very good question. So on top of my head, we have a provisional timeline that some omnibuses will be presented this year, with some that are more, let's say, urgent for the Commission to be passed. That might follow the same fast track procedure that we saw with the Omnibus 1 on the Stop the Clock proposal. So far, nothing official. But I remember reading something a few months ago that I cannot find back. I tried for 10 minutes, but I cannot find it. that detailed basically the quarters of the next omnibuses. So from my memory, I think the second one is very soon, if not already here, and it should be quarter 3, quarter 4 of 2025 for the next ones. I mean, for the next one, for the ones that I know will be presented this year. We're at the Omnibus 4 so far that was presented last week, if I remember well. And that is about, well, as always, same words, simplification package, cut red tape, reduce costs, blah, blah, blah. It will mostly be, from what I remember, on mid-caps and the definition of mid-caps and from which requirements, sustainable requirements contained in other legislations, they will be exempted from, yeah, after the proposal actually passes.
Thanks a lot. And if I can allow myself to also answer part of that question, there's a couple of things that if you're working from a country, you have to realize about the way EU works. First of all, none of the EU institutions, and it would be the Commission's responsibility to do so, but they're not doing it. None of these institutions is publishing a clear timeline or a clear list of what's coming down the pipeline. The list that I showed you, the 9 omnibuses, this is based on civil society monitoring of communications of public officials. Some of these omnibuses that have been announced by a commissioner or by von der Leyen or by other members of the institutions have not been confirmed in any way. Some of them, we don't know what file they're going to be about. Some of them are extremely vague. To give you an idea, the one that we're talking about in this call is supposedly about reporting. CSDDD is not in any way about reporting. It's about due diligence and prevention. So when the European Commission comes out publicly with a statement saying, we're exploring ways by which we are going to lessen reporting for European companies, and then a few days later, they tell you it's about the due diligence directive. There's no logic between the communication and the actual executive power wielding. And so it's up to civil society at the Brussels level, and quite often with the support of specialist organizations at the national level, to monitor these developments and draw a big picture, draw the ability for civil society to monitor these files. Bearing in mind, you can do snapshots, but things change at any given point. So for instance, Omnibus 1 announced in February. At that stage, the Commission is pushing all other co-legislators to fast-track the process and be done by the end of spring. Quite quickly, we realized that's not going to be the case for Parliament, but it might be the case for Council. And now we're in a situation where it looks very likely that even the Council of the European Union will push the end of its negotiations until after the summer. And there's no guessing when the parliamentary negotiations will be ending. And so it's a constant game of hide and seek. It's a constant game of adaptation to a moving goalpost. And I would strongly recommend, if you're looking for information around the omnibuses, first of all, do stay in touch with Friends of the Earth Europe. Do stay in touch with the European Coalition for Corporate Justice. Follow the work of the Corporate Europe Observatory, follow the work of large coalitions that are working at European level to monitor this deregulation. That is the best way by which you can stay up to date with the reality of deregulation. But I also have to say, apologies in advance. We're not always going to be on top of everything at every minute. And that is also a frustration for ourselves, because that work that we're trying to push to national coalitions, we have to do it for ourselves to understand the ways in which the institutions are deregulating. And sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes the Commission does not answer. And I think the ombudswoman's complaint is a very good example of the demonstration of the ways by which civil society organizations are demanding better transparency, better public information from the EU institutions, because quite frankly, they're not providing a properly democratic framework in that regard. Another question. So actually, it's two questions, and I think we can sort of conflate them. Is there a possibility that the criticism from the civil society on Omnibus 1 and the complaints towards the Ombudswoman would hinder, slow, or stop the ongoing negotiations in Council and Parliament?
I can answer this one if you want.
Go for it.
Yeah. I would love to. Genuinely, I would love to. The reality of things is that we have very difficult situations in the commission, in the parliament, in the council as well. As Alban just said, it's changing literally every day. We have to keep in touch and to stay updated every single day when it comes to timelines, content, who says what are the positions, and given the fact that the ombudswoman, if she finds maladministration at the end of this process, is non-binding, legally speaking, I think it loses a bit of its strength. Also, given the fact that I don't feel right now in the parliament, because we're speaking about the, I mean, I'll be mainly speaking about the parliament, but I don't feel like there's this, let's say, respect for institutions that are supposed to, give an opinion and guide the parliamentary life. I don't feel like the ombudswoman results from the ombudswoman investigation and its results could really trigger a stop or really slow the ongoing negotiations at parliamentary level, because the dynamics are way past that. It's mainly who will build which majority, with EPP in the middle every single time. So I don't think so, but I still do think that it's very, very good that she was so reactive, because usually these procedures actually take a full year. Just to get an answer and the opening of this investigation, it took less than a month. So for me, that's a good sign. I think this could have an impact, but not the impact that we would like to have, meaning stop the negotiations or go back to what was before the omnibus. On the second question that I see, if there are any legal ways to challenge the commission if they do not revise the text after, well, if the ombudswoman finds maladministration, I do think so. It's a European law, so it's a lot of provisions, but I do think that under two articles, anybody basically can sue the commission on its action if they can show an actual direct concern or impact, and if they have a legal basis. I would have to double check that. So if you want to send me an email, I can also double check that and get back to you. But on top of my head, it's direct and individual concern, and there's a legal basis to do so. The ombudswoman complaint and inquiry result not being one. So probably, I think so, because we've had some MEPs suing the commission in the past. That happened, not necessarily for maladministration, but that happened as well. So it is doable in the context of this omnibus. The actual and real impact on populations can be proven, can be proved very easily as well. So in theory, should be possible.
Thank you. I think we're coming to the end of the questions we already have. So considering we still have 5 minutes together, I can only encourage you to get to Menti or to the Q&A if Menti doesn't work for you for any reason, and get on it, ask us questions. But maybe that's an opportunity for me to stress something. As we said, the work at EU level is very institutional. We have to interact with the co-legislators. We can introduce complaints to the ombudswoman. We might be able in the future to press to sue the Commission for the ways by which it is currently deregulating, but we're playing the game on an adverse board. The rules are against us to a degree. Time is against us. The political dynamics are against us. And so I want to emphasize the fact that in order for this deregulation drive to be halted or slowed down or affected in any way, we do need two things. First of all, we need interest at national level. And that interest cannot come only in the form of Merz or Macron saying essentially the equivalent of drill, baby, drill, right? If you put it in terms, in Trump terms, that's what Merz and Macron say. But also, we do need a form of public engagement, public uprising, public mobilization. The form of that public interest, that's up to us. That's up to all of the organizations who will try to engage with the public. It can be petition, it can be direct mailing, it can be civil disobedience, it can be direct action, it can be a media push at very local level. I think the tactics by which the public can be engaged are many, but we will not be successful if we keep that fight in the darkness of European hallways. That's just not going to happen. And so if you are working on sustainability, if you're working on green policy making, if you're working on environmental struggles in any way, and you want to contribute to that fight, I would strongly encourage you to speak to your natural audience, the people who are already following you, and make it known to them what's happening at European level. And be aware that this is also a fight for the long run. The organizations that we're all working with have been in it for the past 10 years, more or less. Each of us, I think, Anna, you're the one that's been working on this the longest out of the four of us. I've been working on this for 2 years. Antoine, you were working on this for 2 years, whether in Parliament or in NGOs. Nick, obviously, this is your life, so you've been not necessarily working on CSDDD, but working to defend your basic rights for a long time as well. This isn't something that's going to be fixed next week, next month, unfortunately. This is something that we will be defending in the long run. We are committed, and we would be privileged and happy to find you by our side to fight this fight. I don't believe there's been any other question coming up. So Laura, I see you popping off. I propose you maybe take us to a close. And are there any future GreenPath webinar coming up?
Nope. Before I do my closing, I just wanted to give the speakers a last opportunity. If there's anything, I mean, Alban, you already, kind of wrapped it up really nicely. But Antoine, Nick, Anna, if there's anything, thanks. Also, you can also put it in the chat. We will defend it as long as we are still alive, Nicholas said. Then I really want to, I mean, I'm not used to not having a chat. I'm sorry this didn't work. I want to deliver on behalf of the audience who normally write in the chat. Great, thanks so much. Thanks, dear speakers. I want to give this now to you, Antoine, Nicholas, and Anna. I'm sure speakers, if they participants, if they had had the chance, they would have expressed it. I think it was great. Firstly, to be led a bit through the EU labyrinth, giving you the floor in a sec, Nick, through the EU labyrinth by Antoine. Then thanks, Nick, so much for sharing your emotional roller coaster, which, as Alban said, is really also a quite different perspective to our civil society EU bubble work. And then also, Anna, thanks for using really clear, strong words on the situation and for bringing us the chocolate example, which I think is something that might stick with some of us. And also huge thanks to you, Alban, for guiding us through, chipping in with some extra info, and for this really nice closing. And Nicholas, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, we also sent so like we also gathered like most of the movements and NGOs that are in East Africa that have been like working ECOP and issues in the DRC. We also wrote like our open statement and we sent it to the EU Commission. So like there was a Petersburg climate dialogue, and during this dialogue, I got away and went in, and then we met Vopke. I think I don't know if yeah, some of you know Vopke from the EU Commission, and his assistant, and then we told them about the EU Commission's Omnibus and how and our stand against it, and they told us that we have to send our issues. So we did it, but we didn't get a response. So I think also this also kind of explains that we don't, the system works against us, and but I think we keep fighting until we get justice, because the power is mostly onto the people. Yes.
Thanks so much, Nick, for these very last words. I'm leaving it here. There's no more GreenPaths webinar, but you can rewatch them all on the YouTube channel. I also put some links in the chat, names in the chat. And that's, I think, the last message: to continue checking out our work, and we'll keep you posted about future opportunities to engage. Thanks so much to all of you. Have a lovely day. Bon appetit if you're about to have lunch. And yeah, see you soon, I hope.